Ain't there no.
What up? Welcome to this week's episode of New Orleans Basketball. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined in person with my little brother, Garrick and Raphael. What's poppin' with you, bro?
What up, man? Enjoying the afterglow of the birthday, you know.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you know, it was a special time yesterday. Got to make another trip around the sun. But I also had the NBA draft, man. It's a lot of surprises. The Pelicans took Jordan Hawkins, which is something that we've been talking about for a while, you know, needing that shooting, needed that movement shooting. So it was kind of crazy to see, you know, the Pelicans kind of address that after we've been talking about it. But nah, man, everything's all good on this end. I'm sorry that the crawfish ball is on high down here, man, and it's hot as a mug out here. But it's good to see you, man. Good to have you here, and good to be in this nice little studio, man. It's nice little thing, man.
Yeah. Hey, man, Nick let us come in here, man.
Nick sent the invite, man. sent the escort over here, man. Had to get through all the presidential blockades to get here, but we in the building though, man. Thanks for having us, Nick.
Yeah, for sure. But again, happy birthday to you. It's our birthday week. We share a birthday week, share a lot of things and things like that. But congratulations to you. Congratulations to all the players that got drafted yesterday. All changed their lives and changed their family lives as well. Well, there's anything from the draft that shocked you? To be honest, it was kind of a boring draft. Like, not a whole lot happened. Was there anything that stood out from you that, you know, was like, oh, that's interesting?
Yeah, man. I think, you know, Portland standing, you know, as Dame would call it, 10 toes down on their franchise future going in for Scoot Henderson. I think, you know, I thought maybe that as the you know, they got on the clock, that maybe more of those deals would come out and maybe they would make that move to kind of capitulate to Dame Lillard, but they didn't. They drafted their future guard. I think that was interesting to see. I think Orlando taking Jet Howard very early, man, a guy who we talked about in our guard breakdown, a guy that I was really high on. I wasn't, you know, I didn't think he would go up to 11 and over, you know, guys like Grady Dick and Jordan Hawkins, but you know, just seeing them go in all in for that. And then the Cam Whitmore, man, falling from 4 to 20, you know, from being a top 5 pick to down to 20, and Houston being able to get he and Amen Thompson. I think that's gonna be something, because Cam Whitmore, whether it had been the injuries or I think they said he may have been interviewing wrong, whatever, the talent is there.
Right.
And so if he hits his talent, I mean, I called it on Twitter. It looks like Houston is going to turn into like a Ball is Life mixtape tour. I mean, they got a lot of young guys who like they are mixtape ready, tape ready. So just a couple of interesting things around. But like you said, I think for the most part it was pretty dry. Not a lot of big trades and things. A lot of like business underneath the hood. But I think it was good. What about you? You saw anything in particular?
Well, first and foremost, I think when they got to pick number 3, all of New Orleans held their breath for one way or the other. If you feel one way, if you feel the other way, everybody held their breath. The league, to some degree, held their breath.
I think we were watching it and Woj popped up on TV. And we were like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah, but outside of that, man, you talked about it. The division got better. Obviously, the Spurs get Wemby. Good luck to them yet again after getting Tim Duncan and David Robinson.
Crazy.
Their number 1 pick luck just doesn't run out. But then Houston getting better with the Cam Whitmore sliding all the way to 20, to your point, and getting them in. But then the Mavs, we rog on the Mavs a lot, and you know I always gotta get my shots in on the Mavs. But like they had a really sneaky, really good draft.
Yes,
like,
indeed.
They got off a bad contract. They got Derek Lively, who I think is a great fit next to Luka, like a perfect fit next to Luka. They also got some other players. They got Rashawn Holmes in the trade later. Like their team got better. They got a defender late in the draft as well. Like the entire division got better, including the Grizzlies, who get Marcus Smart, a leader, a veteran, somebody who's been in the playoffs, played a lot of games, played a lot of basketball, meaningful basketball, and can help that locker room grow up. maybe help Ja grow up a little bit as well. So that entire division got better. The Pelicans, I feel like they got better as well, right? And so before we jump into that, make sure you guys follow us on IG. Make sure you follow us on TikTok at NO Basketball, no E. Like the episode below, and most importantly, subscribe to NewOrleans.network. So before we talk about Jordan Hawkins and before we talk about some of the other under the radar moves that the Pelicans made yesterday as well, Pelicans are adding Aaron Miles, assistant coach from Boston. Again, Teresa Weatherspoon gets exited out a couple weeks ago. Here comes Willie Green adding to her staff. How do you feel about that? Willie Green is getting a chance to build the team and the staff and the roster that he wants, and maybe that can hold him accountable, or he trusts their mind to give additional assistance to in terms of building the strategy for now multiple shooters, hopefully healthy stars and things like that. What are your thoughts on that addition to the coaching staff?
Well, I mean, anytime you can kind of get a guy from Boston, right, who has shown a capacity to build into the guys that they draft, and you've seen how their development over there with their stars, as well as, like you said, Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, even some of those guys, and their development. You want to, bring as many of those guys as you can in whenever you have these spots open. And so, it was kind of fairly certain that Aaron Miles was going to go follow Ime Udoka to Houston. So to see, New Orleans kind of get in that mix and to get a guy who is well respected around the league like he is, I think it goes to show, that even with some of the things that have gone on with the Pelicans as far as like the front office and the coaching staff and the training staff, that, there is still a positive outlook on the Pelicans roster as well as situation across the league. And so, to have that guy come in and be a name, to bring in James Borrego, I think it's twofold. Number one, Willie Green is getting a chance. He's been given depending on who you ask, a raw deal as far as his stars not being there, as far as, inheriting a staff that he wasn't able to kind of populate with the people who he wanted around. So now one or two things are happening. He's getting the opportunity to do that, but what it also is doing is saying, hey, you're putting these people in place, and so this is your staff now. And so, if things go wrong, you can't blame it on, hey, this person came, I inherited this person, or this person was here when I got here, or things like that. And so when you have the opportunity to fill the staff up with people that you choose, it should make you be more comfortable, because these are people that you trust and want, but also it lights that fire underneath you that, hey, this is now your responsibility. This is your choices. And if things go wrong, it all falls at your lap. And so, I think this is a positive move. You want to bring in new faces, new minds, new ideas and things like that. And if this guy can come in and kind of help to alleviate some of the things that we saw that Willie Green, some of those growing pains, and kind of expedite that process, then I mean, it should be a positive win. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he and James Borrego bring in. I hope that it kind of refreshes the mindset as far as maybe playing wise, or the offense wise, or who's going to play, rotations, things like that. So anytime you can get new, fresh ideas and then they come from winning organizations like Boston, I think that is a positive move.
Right. I agree. Again, there's going to be so much pressure on this team for so many reasons going into next season, both the roster, the coaching staff, the front office, Gail Benson. It's going to be a lot of pressure. And so at this point, everybody's got to have their ducks in a row and ready to take off, basically. Yeah. Because there's not going to be a whole lot of room for error. So we talked about on our last episode, the Pelicans and the Saints have been known for in recent history finding these undrafted gems, finding these guys that can contribute, that maybe slip out of the draft for one reason or the other. Maybe they don't fit a certain metric that everybody wants to buy by, or they got injury history and things like that. And so we try to identify some folks that might fall into that category. So one of the folks that, the Pelicans went ahead and added to their 10-day exhibit contract was Landers Nollie out of Cincinnati. That was someone we highlighted on the last episode because he had a chopper, right? Like he was 12th in the NCAA in his 3-point percentage. And he has one of those 3-point shots where it's kind of disrespectful. Like he'll look at you pump fake, and still shoot it, and it'll be cash every time. Now, he doesn't give you a whole lot outside of that.
Exactly.
Right? And that's probably why he goes undrafted. He's an older guy. Most of the guys that go undrafted, we say older, man, that makes me feel so old, but are 23, 24, older up there and things like that. But what do you like about a player like Landers Nollie? Again, not saying these guys are necessarily big contributors, but Darion C. Brown, he played minutes last year. Jose Alvarado, nobody saw him coming. Najee Marshall, nobody saw him coming. So you never really know, when you go into a season.
Right. I think if we learned anything from this season, it's to be prepared for everything, right? And then what we also learned from this playoff run is that, some of these undrafted guys and guys that you find on these value contracts and things like that, they have value. And sometimes in this long season, 82 games plus playoffs, you're going to have a game or two from guys that, who may need to step in as undrafted. And so I think a guy like him, he's like you say, he's a disrespectful shooter. He can score from the 3-point line. And I think we saw this season, this draft season, that the Pelicans have a type. They are looking for some of the things that we talked about in shooting. And I think he's a guy that when you get into the summer league, you have an opportunity to showcase some of the skills that you have. And shooting is one of the many skills that he has. So again, he doesn't give you a lot, but what he does give you is shooting, and on a team that is, looking for that, right? If you can come in and set yourself apart, what's stopping you from being a Duncan Robinson, a Max Strus, a guy like that who can contribute? And in a league full of, teams looking for shooting, it may not be the Pelicans, right? But he could come in and kind of play in a summer league role, next to Jordan Hawkins and some of the other guys that we'll talk about, and show that his shooting can translate from college to the pros. So, it'll be interesting to see how he's used in the summer league and if he gets any kind of burn. But like I said, the Pelicans have a type this draft season, and he fits that mold of that type. Right.
So another guy who's similar to that type, Tavion Jones out of Southern Utah. So this player,
Southern Utah.
Yeah, that's a place. In case you didn't know. 18 points per game. Another guy, 3-point heavy, right? 6 attempts per game. Long wingspan. So again, they're looking for more people to add to the wingstop location. And you see that around the league, right? Like smaller guards, it's getting tougher and tougher for them to crack rosters and be on that. I think something that David Griffin alluded to all these years is building sustainable success, right? Like those are the trigger words. Hitting on gyms and hitting on guys like this, that's what leads Miami to the situation that they're in. That's what leads these teams that people generally look at and say, that's a successful franchise, because they're able to develop and find talent where may not necessarily always come like a Southern Utah. So anything on Tavion Jones, again, that's a player that will get his opportunity in Summer League to show what he can do.
I mean, 18 points per game. I mean, in whatever league, there is somebody on the other side of you trying to stop you from scoring. That's and, true. If you can put up 18 points a game for a season, then you can score. And so, again, another guy who's gonna be a threat from the 3-point line. It's crazy. In 2019, when Willie Green was coaching, you had a lot of like defensive players, right? You had the Jose, the Herb, Trey. You had all those like young guys down there. And now it's like the Pelicans team is gonna be bombs away in the players. Like everybody's gonna be shooting threes in summer league. So it actually should lead to some very exciting basketball. But this is a guy, again, between he and Noel, those two guys, you wanna distinguish yourself, right? You want to separate yourself from the other guy. And so, obviously the Pelicans are looking for shooting. And so if you can shoot, I think the Pelicans will keep you around or like I said, there's a lot of teams that are looking for shooting. But again, if you can go in and separate yourself from some of the other shooters that the Pelicans have brought in, you give yourself a chance to play on a team that is desperate for shooting help. So we'll see how he fares in the summer league.
Shooting was one piece. The other part was rim protection. So obviously they only made one draft pick. They traded the second, so it was part of the Josh Richardson trade. But this is the guy that everybody kind of has circled, right? Obviously you're going to be watching Jordan Hawkins. Obviously you're going to be watching EJ Liddell. Obviously you're going to be watching Dyson Daniels in the Summer League. But Liam Robbins out of Vanderbilt, SEC Player of the Year, 7-foot tall center, 23 years old, played 5 years of college basketball at Minnesota, at Drake, at Vanderbilt, things like that. He had a 3.4 block rate, which is better than Derek Lively, the player we're talking about. Not only that, he can help you in the other area too. He shot 37% from three. So this is a guy who can space the floor, protect the rim, like literally the things that the Pelicans have been yelling about, trying to find an answer for, things like that. What are your thoughts on a player like this? Again, a lot of knee injury, 4 leg injuries.
Yes.
Ended his season early at Vanderbilt. Don't know how he won Defensive Player of the Year, even though his season ended early, but still, there's talent there. He's not a super athlete or anything like that, but that's what you get at this part, with the undrafted piece, flawed players. But if you can find a role, if you can carve out a piece for what you can do, you're seeing more and more undrafted players, second-round players, end up on rosters. And with this new CBA, every team's going to be looking for it. I think that's why the draft was born, to be honest with you. I think draft picks are going to become more and more desirable for people because people are going to have to find young talent. What are your thoughts on Liam Robbins? Do you think he has a decent shot to crack the roster?
Yeah, again, you go into this draft with obvious needs, right? You have shooting and rim protection as like the things that are circled at the top of the need board for the Pelicans. And so, when you get a guy like Liam Robbins, and we talked about, earlier in this season when we did our podcast about how the Pelicans look for accolades, right? Accolades in college, right? You got Herb Jones, Defensive Player of the Year, SEC Player of the Year. You got Jose winning Defensive Player of the Year. You got Najee and all of these guys who just have, accolades in college. And Liam Robbins kind of fits that mold as the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. This is a guy that if you need rim protection, 3.4 block rate speaks for itself. And again, for him to have such an excellent season defensively that he gets cut down short and still gets that accolade shows you the amount of work he was putting in when he was healthy. Now, the injuries, right? I think anytime you associate the Pelicans with drafting a player with injuries, let alone lower body injuries, I think that raises red flags and people get a little wonky about it. But I've seen a lot of people, on Twitter, kind of liking him to Walker Kessler, right? And if you find a guy, Utah found a gem in Walker Kessler. Sometimes those guys don't pop right, like in college or pop on tape and everything, but they bring skill sets that can help, right? And skill sets that are valuable. And when you got a guy that is going for blocks and shooting 3-pointers as a 7-footer, I think that is those are some of the skills that are desired in the NBA, especially with this Pelicans team. And so, he's a guy that I think, like you said, a lot of people are going to be watching because, as set as it seems as the rotation is when you go up and down the roster, rim protection is not there. Like there's nobody on the roster other than Jackson, and we don't really know what's going to be happening there. Other than Jackson Hayes that gives you that rim protection. So he is literally trying out for a role that is not filled on the team. And so he has a chance, right? He has a chance if he can show that he can stay healthy and continue to be aggressive in blocks and shot contests and rebounds and still knock down that 3-ball. I think he has a good shot of at least getting on one of those like EJ Liddell contracts last season, or one of those 10-day contracts where they want him to travel and be with the team until he is ready to contribute. But he's going to be a guy, right? We're going to be watching him very closely because he brings a skill set that is just not there on the Pelicans team. And they added him. They wanted to bring him in for a reason, right? And I think it'll be interesting to see if he can show some of the things that we see on tape, if that can translate over. He has a shot. He definitely has a shot.
I agree. So again, Summer League should be a lot of fun for this team. They've been really good at Summer League over the past couple of years.
Yeah, no kidding, man.
It's crazy that we look back and think about Herb's rookie game and Trey's rookie game and things like that. So let's get to the player that they actually drafted. Jordan Hawkins out of UConn. What are your initial reactions? Obviously, we've been talking about this player for a long time. I think it was fairly obvious. Anyone who could read the room and say the Pelicans are void of shooting, this guy's one of the best shooters in the draft. The two match very well. But what are your initial reactions when they actually make the pick? And what do you think his fit is moving forward?
I was excited. I was because, again, this is a guy we've been talking about for a while, right? And just the things that he does on a basketball court are not, again, it's just not there for the Pelicans. And even in a sense of Trey Murphy, we'll get into kind of what the differences between those two are. I just think that, his game and what he's going to inject into the offense, I think that that's such an aspect of the game that the Pelicans just have not had in a long time, right? Even with JJ Redick here, he wasn't as effective.
That was the end.
Yeah, that he wasn't as effective as everybody thought he was going to be. So, when you bring in a guy, when you talk about the Pelicans need shooting, and you bring in a guy who now has a lot of comps to Ray Allen and Richard Hamilton, those are two very distinct players who did things very well from two distinct areas. Most of it included shooting.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, what people are sleeping on is his defensive ability, right? I don't think that he's going to be, Herb Jones by any sense of the imagination, but he is an excellent off-ball defender. He's an excellent an IQ defender, right? Like, not a guy who's going to stop you, stand you up, but I think he can think the game in a lot of ways. And I don't think a lot of people are heralding him for that. So first impression, I was ecstatic because I knew that he was available once Derek Lively came off the board and Jordan Hawkins kind of got to the Pelicans draft spot. I kind of figured they would go with him because he was here working out with the Pelicans. But just to kind of see them actually go in and address the one thing. Listen, Fred Vinson's shooting school, you can't have the entire team enrolled there. You cannot have the entire team enrolled in Fred Vinson's shooting school. You can't. The courses they are extensive, all right? And you can't just have the whole roster in there. Somebody had to come in and say, you know what, we can skip or maybe I can go on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays to class, and we'll take the Herb Jones School of Defense as more of the direct approach. But coming into the league, knowing how to shoot, man, we have seen that is a skill that is very difficult for young players to get if they don't have it. It's good to see the Pelicans address a wide open need that everybody saw and address it directly with one of the best shooters in the draft.
Right. So obviously he's got the connection with Swin Cash from UConn. You mentioned the Ray Allen piece. You remember the Rich Hamilton piece. He plays very similar to those players. The thing that I really look at with this player is he's a shorter guy. I say short. He's 6 for NBA standards, especially when you're standing next to Victor Wembanyama.
Oh, God.
He's a shorter guy, but he's taller than most of the guards on the Pelicans roster. But there's a lot of guards on the Pelicans roster. You already got CJ. You already got Dyson. You already got Kyra. You already have Jose. Like, you already have all of these guards. And so Trajan mentioned it in the post-conference after. He ain't just going to be handed a spot. And, I think that it's going to be important for Willie to have some growth this season of when to use him. Because you've seen over the past couple years, you've got to show you can defend. You've got to show you can pick up the system. They're all very confident that he's able to do that. Like Herb played early, and they wanted Dyson to play early, but he kept getting hurt and things like that. I think he's built of that same mold, and that he's a savant of the game. Like he's constantly thinking about where am I going next. His conditioning level is JJ Redick like because he's constantly moving. That's young. That's something difficult. Cam Whitmore said he's the most difficult person to guard of all the people he could pick because he never stops moving.
Right.
And if a player like that happens to be on the court with Brandon Ingram and Zion and CJ and Trey, and you got to chase him all the way around, that just opens the floor for so many people. So it's going to be a balancing act with this coaching staff of, do we let him take his rookie lumps or do we wait till he's ready to defend and things like that? But you bring up a good point, and I think it's important that we talk about. Trey is already an elite shooter. You saw what he did toward the tail end of last year and what he was able to grow throughout the last year. But they're very different, right? Like Trey is more of a catch and shoot player. He's more of a wing, like take you off the dribble, and you see that part of his game starting to develop. But he's not constantly hunting his shot. In fact, sometimes Trey wouldn't shoot the ball enough, right? This is not something you have to worry about with Jordan Hawkins. In fact, you're going to have to reel him back a little bit. Like, hey, relax a little bit. Maybe pass that on. Let's pull it back out. and pass that thing to Zion or BI or something like that. I think he's that type of player that has that irrational confidence that every shot I shoot is going in the goal. And if I touch the ball, it's probably going up. And so Trajan talked about it in his post game. He's like, hey, it's great that he gets them up, but he got to make them, right? And that's what's going to keep him on the court and things like that. So something that you brought up that I think is important, something he was knocked on was his defense coming out the draft. That's why he slipped. People were like, oh, he's not a creator off the dribble. Oh, he's not taking to the goal. He's just a shooter. I just don't see that. Like when I watch his game, yes, what he does best is shooting. But you bring up a great point in terms of what he's able to do defensively. The main reason why he gets beat is because he's slight of frame. Because people just bully him and get to the basket, which is going to be a problem in the NBA. Like, don't expect him to play a whole lot of minutes to start the season. Like, he's going to have to prove he can hold up because what did you see in the playoffs? The teams are just going to find whoever the weakest defender is and hunt that person. But he's very active, and his effort defensively is elite. Like, I think that with a player like that who you don't have to pull it out of him, you just have to put mass on his body. He has a long wingspan already. He had 18 blocks as a guard. Like, it's not that he doesn't want to play defense. It's just that he doesn't have the physical capability to do that just now. And so I kind of shake my head at the people who are like, well, he's never good defensively. He's going to be a liability. The other thing about him, people compare him to Ray Allen. People compare him to Rip Hamilton. People compare him to J.J. Redick, those type of shooters. None of those guys get off the ground like him. Like, he's an athlete, too. Like, he will punch it on you going to the goal. And that's different from shooter. Again, we see it with Trey, Mr. Slam Dunk Contest. But this guy's 6'5". And so if you get caught sleeping, we talk about, pulling it down, calling on the closeout and shooting the jumper or shooting the pull-up. But if he can take it to the goal and finish with some authority, too, that's the next step in his game. And so I agree with you. I think that the fact that he's a movement shooter, his ability to constantly hunt his shot from different locations, doesn't have to be set. All of those things shot 49% on catch and shoot threes. All of those things are great. But I think that there is more to his game that's going to be unlocked as he continues to progress. Is there anything that worries you about the player? I know some people, one way or other, felt that, oh, this was a letdown. This is just you're settling because you needed a shooter, but you could have got something else. Is there anything that worries you about his game?
No, as far as his fit for the Pelicans, I don't think so. Again, I mean, obviously the defensive concerns, especially in playoff basketball or like intense basketball, when they can go through and find the guy that's the worst defender and kind of pick on him, and how does that if that does happen to him early, how does that affect his confidence, and how does that affect the confidence of Willie Green in him? Because we've seen Willie put Trey out there, and then Greg Popovich had him in the Smoothie King blender, and Trey had to sit for a couple of games. So we've seen that happen. So I think that's one of the ones. But to kind of touch on a point that you made about him, like I think what he is going to bring when people talk about if you drafted for need, right? And yes, the Pelicans did draft for need, but I think one of the things that people aren't taking into consideration about it, if and when he does play, is the effect that he's going to have on the other players around him. And he said it in a post in his interview, his first interview with and I think Will Guillory and I think Christian got some questions in to him, and he was talking about what is he gonna do for the guys on the team, talking about Brandon Ingram and Zion and CJ, that he's gonna get those guys easier shots. And that's a very important part of this draft pick, because you're not only drafting the guy for what he's gonna do on the court, meaning like his points per game and things like that, the shooting that he's gonna bring, but the way he's gonna shift the court, especially if you put him in there with Trey Murphy as well. Listen, he's coming into the league with a reputation of shooting. He worked out with Chris Brickley, who works out with everybody. Right. And Chris Brickley was like, this is one of the greatest shooters I've ever seen. And he works out with all NBA players. They have a lot of LA runs. And so he's going to come into the season and come into the league with a reputation of shooting. So when we talk about Trey Murphy being a 5-alarm fire, right, and the defense having to always know where he is because they are fully aware of what he's capable of, I think, Jordan Hawkins is going to have a little bit of that as well. And so when you think about Jordan Hawkins, who moves and running through around and has the slippery off ball badge, that's a guy that's going to have the defense having to make a lot of decisions. And I'm always a fan of, if you're an offense, the more decisions that you have to make, defenders make, the better the window is that they're going to make a mistake.
Right.
And on a team filled with Zion and Brandon Ingram and CJ and Trey Murphy and that, if you get guys to make a couple of mistakes because Jordan Hawkins keeps running baseline to baseline, and now Brandon Ingram has a one-on-one mismatch, or God forbid Zion be open or things like that, I think those are things that'll help with the offense. So it's not just about the draft pick in terms of the player. When you get to 14, you're not going to find Scoot Henderson. You're not finding Victor Wembanyama. You're not finding Brandon Miller. You're trying to find people and players who will help you contribute to win. And I think that Jordan Hawkins is a guy who can help contribute to winning. And I think he can do it very early, especially as a guy who has played a lot of basketball, who was the leading scorer of a championship winning team. He has a winning pedigree. He understands the game a lot more. And he's not the typical teenager that the Pelicans have been drafting, as far as Dyson Daniels and things like that. And so this is an older guy who will get, who I think Willie Green will go and he may find that he has more trust in him earlier because of his coaching and the things that he's been through than he would some of the other younger guys that we talked about.
Right. You saw Larry Nance tweet shortly after that, yes, we got shooting, right? And
yes.
I think, to put a bow on it, he's a really smart player. Like Griff, a couple seasons ago, said we need to get smarter. We need guys with more basketball IQ, and they've done that since. Has a super high IQ in terms of finding his shot on the floor. He had 55 contested threes at all different angles. And again, it's because he knows where something I watch his tape, he's really good at coming off the screen and knowing the defender's behind him and shooting it, knowing that he's going to get the foul. Like he had multiple 4-point plays last year because he knows where the defender is at all times. I think that's something that a lot of shooters that enter the NBA have to find and have to learn along their game, and he's already there. So again, I agree with you. I think that it's going to take him a little bit at the beginning, not because he doesn't have the ability, but because if healthy, that rotation is going to be tough to crack, right? There's a lot of guys there that are fighting for spots. It's going to be tough, but I think eventually, he's going to crack it because of what he brings to the team. And so let's talk about the Griff and Trajan press conference. Obviously, they talked about what they liked about of Hawkins and his mentality, his makeup, how he approaches the game. He's already a professional in a lot of ways, his IQ. But there was a couple other nuggets in there that were a little bit interesting, right? Like people asked him, Griff, at any point, did you think about getting up in the draft? Did you think about trading up? No. We were good where we're at. We're comfortable where we're at, which some Pels fans probably threw their hands in the air. Like, what you mean you're comfortable where you're at? Hey, were there any other players? He's like, hey, we were happy where Jordan was there and he was available. What are your thoughts on? Like, we've talked about it. Like, if you listen to what Griff and Trajan have been saying this entire time, you shouldn't be surprised that he's saying the roster we have right now, outside of rim protection and addressing that because they haven't done that yet, it's probably going to be the roster that they ended the season with or very similar to. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird because we talked about it earlier. Like right after the season was over, the exit presser, David Griffin said, like, we know we aren't good enough, right? And he said, we know that things have to change. And I think that everybody kind of took, including myself, kind of took that as, well, he means the roster, right? He means the roster. But when you look at, that statement and you look at, what has changed since then, when you talk about some of the medical staff movement that has been made. He talked about the analytics team. He talked about, you think about Teresa Weatherspoon being gone and James Borrego being in and things like that. And now you look at the roster and, that you add one additional person to Jordan Hawkins. You say, oh, we're good. Other than the rim protection, you see that he meant it was like a franchise overlook, a franchise comment where the entire franchise had to change because they weren't good enough. And so, like you said, when you look at the trades that didn't happen, Griff he said that they never figured that they were going to move up. They never thought about trading And I think that they did have Jordan Hawkins targeted. He came in for a workout. And when he started to get to around that pick, and I think they are comfortable in where they are now. He did mention rim protection, right? He addressed the two things that we've been talking about all season, who everybody's been talking about all season, is the rim protection and the shooting. And so he used those words. He used shooting, he used rim protection. And so for like we were saying about Liam, that the rim protector is not on the roster. And so for him to say that they need to address rim protection means that either there's more moves to come, or there's something going on. There's going to be something going on, but there needs to be an addressing of the rim protection, and they know that. And so now that they have the shooter intact, and obviously they brought in a bunch of other undrafted shooters, and obviously with Liam that we're going to be looking for, I think that there's going to be a move. There's going to be an attempt to address the rim protection. And I think it's coming. And I think you heard it from David Griffin's mouth that they want to address that. And I think they will. And so I don't think that the Pelicans offseason is nowhere near over. I think that they do have some choices to make, some decisions to make. And it was good to hear David Griffin and Trajan Langdon kind of mention that, hey, rim protection is something that we need to address. And with that person not on the roster yet, it shows that there's going to be further movement.
All right. The thing that I took the most out of that presser is what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks. You need to have a plan A, you need to have a plan B, and you need to have a plan C. The reason why I didn't like a lot of the guards and the Kobe Buffkins of the world and things like that is those players are best with the ball in their hands. Griff talked about it. He said, listen, when we're healthy, we need somebody who can create gravity, who can do things off ball, because we already have guys. Like the reason that Jordan Hawkins appealed to them was because at UConn, he wasn't ball dominant. He was already doing like a lot of players when they transitioned to the NBA, they were going from being ball dominant to, hey, now you're a role player, buddy. Figure it out. He was already playing off ball and still averaged 16 points a game. So he's like, the thing that he was doing already, we're not asking him to do a different role. Plan B. Let's say one of those main guys are not there. You can create offense off of what he's able to do and the way that he plays. You can, again, with James Borrego coming in and some of these other offensive minds to kind of help form a better strategy around how to get good looks for the team, you can use him as part of that. Running plays for him, running plays for Trey. And so in that scenario, it preps you for both best case scenario and worst case scenario. So for like all the people who are like, well, why would you draft a player that only is going to have value if Zion and Brandon Ingram are on the court and they're never on the court? Well, if they're not on the court, I still think that there's value to be added from a Jordan Hawkins.
Yeah, and I think just to that point, I think if you get to a certain point where if you have so many ball dominant players and shot creators that you get to a level of diminishing returns, right? Like you can't be as great as you should be because I can't put the ball in your hand. It's kind of similar to what people think they're seeing with Scoot Henderson and Dame, right? If Scoot Henderson is your point guard of the future, he needs the ball in his hand. Well, Damian Lillard isn't playing off ball. And I think, to a very, obviously a much smaller extent, you can't have everybody can't be a shot creator, right? Because eventually you're so far down on the pecking order that you don't get to use those skills. And so I think having a guy that can play off ball, whether Zion, Brandon Ingram aren't out there and Jordan Hawkins gets his shot on the floor, even with he and like CJ and Trey Murphy, that's a lot of offensive shooting and things, and you can run things with Jordan Hawkins with CJ and Trey Murphy. So I do think that it was a good pick. It is a pick for need. But it is a really decent pick for need when you think about all of the things that he can do on the floor offensively.
For sure. So, again, the Pelicans have a short draft, but they pick up some interesting and excellent players for what they need along the way. But the offseason is just getting started. So, free agency will be upon us sooner rather than later, and there will be some other roster moves. With that being said, that's all we have for you today. What you got left for the people in this great studio?
I know,
Nick
man.
was gracious enough to let us sit in.
Nick be getting my good side in here. I need to come spin pass over here a little more often. I'm a lot more handsome in this camera than mine. But as always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. The draft is over. Zion and Brandon Ingram are still Pelicans players.
Surprise!
And so we'll see how this team builds and fills out the rest of this roster around them. And we'll be here to cover it all. So follow me at Garrick _Rattler on Twitter. Follow my brother at Raphael _Rattler. Follow the page at NO Basketball No E on Twitter and Instagram. And most importantly, subscribe to NewOrleans.network. I'll be coming over here more often, Nick. I might even move in here, so I might be in the back of the NOF podcast. So we'll see y'all next week, man.
Yes, sir. We out.
Hey, Vino.